Hello, friends. Dr. Kazmi once again, and today we are going to further talk about the epidemic and pandemic modeling. And today we will be looking at a close look. We'll be taking a close look at the SIR model. I have already talked about the SIR model in my previous lectures, but this time we are going to play around with the SIR model. So I am here on a website where we would be doing some real-time modeling, changing some parameters and see how things they move when we change different parameters related to an infectious disease. Okay, so we'll start with the concept of an individual or what we call as the case zero. So case zero is always that very person who gets the disease, who is the first person to get disease in any given population. So here you can see that if you look at the center of this web page, so this is a grid, and this grid is actually showing the number of people, and this center red dot is actually showing that this is the index case. So let's say this index case is the one who is suffering from COVID-19, and he's the one who's going to spread it around to other people, and then the other people would spread it to further, people around in their vicinity, and so on and so forth. So this is the person, and he would be actually infecting the people surrounding him more. So those people who come in close contact with him, he would be transmitting on the infection to those people, and then those people will be transmitting it to further other people who come in contact with them, so on and so forth. So this is how the epidemic. So in the course of this lecture, whenever you will see this red dot would mean an infectious persons. More the number of red dots, it means more the number of infectious people. Okay. Now, at the same time, we take the concept of time because everything moves on a timeline. We are living in a space-time, continuing the space-time mention. So everything moves on the timeline. So let's see if there is one person who is infected and he transmitted to four people, then how those four people would transmit to other people. So if we run this model over here, so you see within a short period of time, all the people have been infected. Let me go step by step. So this one person, he infects four people surrounding him. Then those people, infected eight people around them, so on and so forth. So every day, as more and more number of people are getting infected, the disease is spreading in the population or in the community, and that's how it spreads. So after some time, theoretically, all the people would be infected in this particular community. Now, it seems very scary. I mean, even if you go to the COVID tracker website and you look at the number of people, and when you say, okay, well, more than 5 million people have got COVID-19 all over the world in the last couple of months, and among them, this number of people have died. So it probably seems that at this point in time, there are perhaps 5 million people who are living on this planet Earth having COVID-19. But it's not like this because somebody who gets an infection, and we are talking about the timeline. So this 5 million means that so far 5 million people have been infected right from the time that this pandemic started. It doesn't mean that at this point in time there are 5 million people right at this time who have got the disease. In fact, it would be very low as compared to, because people are getting it over a period of time. So as they are getting it, either they are getting recovered or they are dying. So they are getting subtracted from the population as well. So there is a concept of recovery as well. So people are getting infected at the same time they are getting recovered as well. So how do these two relate to one another? So let's say somebody who gets the disease, okay, and he recovers after 2 days. So let's say this is the person in the center, and he infects four people around him. The other day, those four people, they infect eight people in them, but because the disease, let's say, theoretically, this disease has got a time frame of 2 days. Within 2 days, that person, the index case, who actually was the one responsible for spreading this infection to four other people surrounding him, he has recovered. Now, as this disease progresses, further people are infected, but what is happening? You will see the gray dots, it's showing that the people are getting recovered. So if we plan it over a further period of time, you will see The number of infected people is spreading in the, let's say, in the periphery of the community, but at the same time, the number of recovered people is also increasing. So by the time everybody in this community has been infected, at that given point in time, very few people are infected. So you would see probably that 12 people infected, let's say as of today, while majority of the people have been recovered. So it's important to understand that at any given point in time when an epidemic or a pandemic is progressing, you would be having some infected people, you will be having some recovered people as well. And then we would be talking about the deaths as well. And at the same time, we would be talking about the concept of asymptomatic transmission, because not everybody who gets infected would develop symptoms. At the same time, when you get the germs, there is a time lag, during which the virus is multiplying in your body. You're infectious, but you're not having any symptoms. So you feel you're absolutely all right. And during that time, you are still infectious. You can spread it to the other people, but it's hidden. So you feel you are all right, but you're all right, but you're spreading the disease at the same time. So let's talk about that as we go down. So we would be talking about the incubation period. So incubation period is the time when a person actually contracts the disease and he exhibits his symptoms. So it's basically the time lag between the entry of the infectious pathogen in your body and the onset of the first symptoms. So that is what we call as incubation period. And the incubation period for COVID-19 is anywhere between 2 to 14 days, but they say the median is around 5 to 7. Fine. So if we now plot the same thing on this mathematical model, let's say the median incubation period is 7 days for COVID-19. And once you have developed the symptoms, those symptoms would remain for, let's say, a median of 8 days. So let's say you've got fever, cough, body aches, and etc., etc. So you will have these symptoms for the next 8 days, and after 8 days, you will be symptom free. So let's say if the median incubation period is 7 days and the median time frame with symptoms is 8 days, how does it plot on this graph? So you see now the red dots are a bit faded. It simply means that the person, index person, he got the disease. He is not at the moment exhibiting the symptoms because he's still within the incubation time period. But at the same time, while he's in incubation period and he is symptom free, he is spreading the virus to other people. So the other people are getting infected. Everybody thinks that there is no problem, but in fact, there is a hidden transmission of the disease in the community. So you see, now there is a hidden transmission going on, and this would go on for 8 days from the time the first person was infected, because then you will start showing symptoms. So we go on, we move, as every click is registering 1 day. People are getting, now after 8 days, you see the first person was responsible for, well, you can call him the case zero. He is now exhibiting symptoms. So at least all of a sudden now somebody has got this COVID-19. People got to say, oh, we have got the first person in our community. While in fact, if you see, there are a lot many people who have contracted disease and they're also passing through the incubation period, and sooner or later they would come up with a symptom. So as now the time progresses, all of a sudden you see a rise in the number of symptomatic cases. So it's increasing every day, it's increasing and it's good. But again, at the same time, I told you about that people would get recovered as well. So now the case zero, the first person who brought the infectious disease into this community, he has recovered. He's not showing any symptoms, or maybe his test has also become negative. Now, as next day passes, those 4 initial people who got infected by him, they've also recovered. So you see at this point in time, there is asymptomatic transmission going on in the community. At the same time, you have got symptomatic people who might be transmitting, might not be transmitting, depending on whether they're in isolation, they're in hospitals, or whether still roaming outside. And at the same time, there are the number of people who are getting recovered from the disease. So it's going on. So every day, as you see, now the number of infectious diseases is increasing, symptomatic people is also increasing, but recovered people is also increasing. And if we track it over a period of time, after some time, you will see that now the disease starts going down. So what is happening? You are now seeing a reduction in the number of cases while the number of recovered people is increasing. So on data, what will you see? You will see, okay, well, fine, this much number of people so far had COVID-19, this much have died, but there's a huge number of people who have recovered. So you would see a flattening or a plateau or a decrease in the curve of the epidemic. And if you plot it, a time would come theoretically when everybody would have recovered. Okay. Uh, Now, uh, the thing is that we also want to include the probability of infection. Again, so far we have taken a very simplified approach to it, and we have taken for granted that whosoever gets the virus, he is transmitted to four people. So it becomes very simplistic, okay. But in reality, not every person is transmitting infection to other people. Some people, depending on what they do, how much they are mobile out in the community, they would have more chance of spreading the disease. And those people who have more of a sedentary lifestyle, they might not, come across that many people to infect. So we always talk about a probability of infection. So probability varies from situation to situation, from person to person, from ethnicity to ethnicity, so on and so forth. So there is always a probability, and this probability can be high or low depending on person to person. So we can simply say that real diseases don't spread out with 100% certainty. They always spread in a probabilistic fashion. And when we talk about probabilistic infection, we are looking at a new parameter which is known as the transmission rate. And transmission rate is what controls the chance that an infected person, the person who has got an infection, he passes it on to other people. And you need to know what would be the average transmission rate for a particular disease if you want to see what can you do in order to prevent the disease from spreading in the population. So let's say we take the transmission rate of 0.5. So transmission rate of 0.5 means that there is a 50% of probability of transmitting that infection. For example, let's say if I've got the infection and let's say I meet 4 people, then the probability of me infecting the other people is 50%. In simply other words, out of 4, 2 people would be infected while 2 other won't. And again, as I said, that this is not a fixed value. It is a very dynamic value. It changes from person to person. But let's say for the sake of simplicity, we take the transmission rate as 0.5. And again, this transmission rate or the probability of spreading infection can be played around with. I mean, you can reduce it by self-isolation. You can reduce it by strict hand hygiene. You can reduce it by social distancing. You can reduce it by wearing masks, and so on and so forth. So let's say earlier we talked about that the incubation time period, let's say, is 5 to 7 days. Days with symptoms are 8, and the transmission rate is 0.5. So what would happen? Let's play this around. So what is happening? You can see that the disease is spreading, and within a short period of time, the disease spread in all of the communities, and people, they got infected. They were asymptomatic, then they became symptomatic, then they become recovered. And by the end, you can see all the boxes are gray. So it simply means that everybody has recovered. Now, what I would do is let me reduce the transmission rate. So if I bring it down to, let's say, 0.4, okay. And now let's play around with this. You can see it is spreading more slowly. Number of infected people at any given time is less. But as the time progresses, more and more people are getting recovered. And by the time the pandemic finishes, majority of people have recovered, but there were still people who didn't get the infection. They were lucky because the disease was not spreading that rapidly. So they didn't get the infection. Now, let's play it around further and reduce it further. So let me bring it down to 0.36. Okay. I would reset it and let's do it again. Now you see, now it is spreading slowly. Few number of cases, more number of people getting recovered. It is spreading asymmetrically in the population. Let's see what happens. So you see, it is spreading very slowly and it takes a longer time, but eventually it fizzles out from the society. So at a probability of 33%, where 1 person would infect probably 1 in 3 persons, the disease spread would be slow. It would be there, But over a period of time, let's say 12 months to 18 months, it will eventually fizzle out. And if I further reduce it down to, let's say, 0.3 or 30%, let's see what happens now. Now you can see the disease spread is very slow. You see, it actually fizzled out in the beginning. What we are seeing in COVID-19 is that it spread very rapidly. There was huge mortality in certain countries, especially the European countries and the United States. And then it plateaued and it's gradually coming down. So I think based on this model, the probability of transmission is around, I would say 40% or 0.4. So again, or 0.39 to 0. So let's do it with 0.39. Reset it. And you can see the disease is spreading. People are getting record, but it is going everywhere. And a huge chunk of population is infected. So I think this is more close to the actual reality of COVID-19. And it means that the transmission rate is around 39 to 40%, or in other words, the probability of an infected person transmitting it to others is just 40%, or in other words, just 1 in 3, more than 1 in 3, they are getting infected. Okay, now let's talk about the death rates. I'll come down to death rates. And we know that people die as well. And especially in UK, the mortality rate has been around 13 to 14% for those people who have been infected. But again, we know this is high because not everybody has been tested. There is a denominator over here as well. And we think that probably 3 times more than the number of people who have been tested and came out positive, they might be having the disease. So on average, the mortality rate is around 3 to 6%, anyway, 3 to 6%. So one of the reasons, as I said, is that we had more of the older age population, which was more vulnerable, and then depends on the number of testing as well. So let's put this value in this simulation and see where it leads to. So let's say the fatality rate is 3%, okay, or let me take it down to take it up to 4%. More close to realistic, and let's say the average encounters per day is 10, like a person on average meets 10 people around him, and his travel radius is around 5 kilometers. So on maximum he would be traveling around 5 kilometers. Again, with the social isolation, lockdowns, this can be reduced as well, or with travel restrictions it can be further reduced. And let's say the transmission rate is 0.3, or let me bring it up to 0.39, more close to reality. Here we go, 0.39. Okay, fine. And the travel radius, let's say I will bring it down maybe to 3 kilometers. Okay, and we'll reset it and let's see what happens. So here you can see the disease is spreading rapidly. And what happens is we get these black dots are actually showing us the mortality. And you can see that the disease spread in all of the community. There were many people who died here and there. That comes totally around 4%, but almost everybody got infected. So if we limit the encounters per day, and let's say with social isolation or lockdowns, if I bring it down to, let's say 4, and I reset it, let's see what happens with the mortality. Disease is still spreading, but again, now you can see that the mortality is quite spread around. Okay, again, by the end, almost majority of the population got infected, majority they recovered. There were a few people here and there who didn't catch the infection, and then there was 4% mortality, which was spread around in the community. And again, as I said, this could be in different age groups, especially in the elderly, which are more vulnerable. So you can see that in short, the SIR model looks at the progression of the pandemic depending on various parameters. And again, as I said, that the infection itself can be asymptomatic, it can be symptomatic, and especially in case of COVID-19, when a person gets the virus entered into his body, 2 days after that, he becomes infectious. So though he may not be exhibiting the signs and symptoms, he can still transmit it to other people. And again, it depends on how mobile that person is, how active that person is, how close he come across other people. That would determine the probability of transmitting the infection. Again, as I said, that the more you are close to other people, um, more are the number of your interactions, uh, the higher would be the probability of transmitting it to other people. If you limit your encounters, if you, let's say, you are doing self-isolation, you are doing quarantining of those people who are symptomatic, or let's say you are using good hand hygiene measures, you are using masks, other protective gear, then the probability of infection would be low and the disease spread would be low. In other words, the curve of the epidemic would not be that steep or that high. And again, it also depends on how much you are traveling. Remember, the more you travel, the more are the chances of spreading it to the those population where the immunity is quite low. And again, as I said, it also depends on the incubation period. The longer the incubation period, the more the chances of spreading it around. The shorter the incubation period, because you quickly become symptomatic, and when you become symptomatic, you are more prone to self-isolate yourself. You are more prone to follow the instructions rather when you are not having any signs and symptoms. It becomes a bit more difficult to convince you that you should be doing all those measures which are recommended. So longer the incubation period, more chances of spread. Shorter the incubation period, less the chances of spread. So as I said, you can play around with all these parameters, and that tells us actually how the disease would be spreading in the community. So this website is there if you want to do your own modeling, depending on which country you live with and what are your parameters over there, your case fatality rates, the number of encounters, depending on whether you've got good strict lockdowns over there or whether you go like very lenient lockdowns or whether no lockdowns. You can play around with the parameters and you can get an idea what's going to happen in your society in terms of morbidity and mortality. This was a very simple lecture explaining to you how to play around with SIR model, because as I said in my initial lectures, I actually tried to explain it with different graphs, but here I have tried to actually play around with different parameters and tell you how this happens. So we have run a very simplistic simulation to tell how pandemics or epidemics they behave based on various parameters which can change. Thank you very much for listening to me. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a good day. Bye.